Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the AI for Good Global Summit, always online, all year long. We hope that you, your family, your friends, and your colleagues are all keeping healthy and safe. My name is Fred Werner from the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, and it's a privilege for me to introduce today's webinar. Now, the ITU is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies, and we're also the organizers of the AI for Good Global Summit, alongside with Xprize Foundation, and in partnership with 37 UN organizations, ACM, and co-convened with Switzerland. And the goal of the AI Summit is to identify practical applications of AI to advance the Sustainable Development Goals and scale those solutions for global impact. And like most of the world, the AI Summit has gone digital, and we're moving forward with weekly programming, allowing us to reach more people than ever before. Now, one could say that the heart of the summit has always been organized around the breakthrough sessions, where we aim to connect AI innovators with problem owners to generate AI for good projects. And this year, it's no exception. And we're moving forward with a breakthrough days, where we'll be presenting a series of all-star keynotes, interactive workshops, project presentations, announcements, all taking place over the next 10 days. And we're counting on your active participation to help drive these projects forward. Now, before I introduce today's first speaker, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping issues. First of all, your microphone has been disabled, so please use the chat and Q&A function if you wish to communicate. It's the role and responsibility of a moderator to identify questions and ask these questions to the keynotes and the panelists. And we're counting on your active participation to have a very interactive session. Now, speaking of being interactive, I have a first challenge for you. Can you please let us know where you're connecting from? Simply use the chat function and make sure you mark it chat to everyone and let us know what city, what country, what organization you're coming from. Here, I'll go first. Geneva, Switzerland. So I see some people connecting from Los Angeles, from France, from DC, from Dallas, from Bolivia, from Mexico, from Huntington Beach, from Turkey, from Manila, from, I don't know where that is. Okay, Argentina. Wow, so a lot of different countries here, and this really is an international audience and fitting for a global summit. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's first speaker. His name is Dr. Chesib Lee, and he's the director of the Standardization Bureau for ITU. Dr. Lee, welcome, and please, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Fred. Our friends and colleagues, good afternoon from Geneva. Actually, you say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you stay. I really wish you have a good health. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to these AI for Good Breakthrough Days. We have a very exciting 10 days ahead. These breakthrough days are the culmination of our work in 2020 to help new partners build AI for Good projects that we can launch today for long-term global impact. The Action-Oriented AI for Good series is the leading United Nations platform for AI. We aim to achieve breakthroughs able to improve all people's lives everywhere in the world. We look towards the guiding lights of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, this year focusing on gender equality, food security, and how our interconnected society could overcome pandemics such as COVID-19. We will enjoy keynotes from world-renowned experts in AI and humanitarian action. We will share our views on this year's proposed projects, and we will find new opportunities to work together. The AI for Good movement has kept pace with the challenges brought on by COVID-19. All year, always online, the AI for Good movement marches on. Online, this movement is growing stronger, becoming even more inclusive and more scalable towards global impact. This year, the AI for Good platform has hosted a series of expert talks on a wide spectrum of topics in a wide variety of interactive formats. Innovators proposing projects in our 3 breakthrough tracks have enjoyed broad participation in their work, mentored by experts from a diverse set of disciplines. We have expanded participation in the AI for Good Innovation Factory, as well as our frequent AI and data challenges. We have also brought new partners, tools, and data resources to the ITU challenges on AI and machine learning in 5G, where hundreds of competitors from over 50 countries are working towards a grand challenge final from 15 to 17th December 2020. Over the coming 10 days, the 3 finalists in each of this year's breakthrough tracks will work to refine their proposals together with you, the diverse AI for Good community. The projects to rise to the top will be those that show the most potential for global impact. But achieving global impact requires contributions with a global perspective, contribution driven by a diverse collection of expertise. Global impact demands new partnerships, and we continue to build these partnerships on the AI for Good platform. ITU is the UN agency specializing in information and communication technologies, ICTs. We are a neutral platform for ICT stakeholders to unify discussions of international concern. Our global membership includes 193 member states and over 900 companies, universities, and international and regional organizations. ITU members work together to bring the benefits of ICTs to everyone worldwide. So we coordinate the global allocation of radio frequency spectrum and the satellite orbital positions. We develop international standards, providing technical foundations for global growth and innovation in ICT. And we support countries around the world in advancing their ICT development. AI and machine learning have come to influence many fields of our technical work. We see this in ITU standards work for network orchestration and management, multimedia coding, service quality assessment, and environmental efficiency. We see this in our standards work for smart cities, digital health, digital finance, smart mobility, smart energy, and smart agriculture. To ITU, it is very clear that everyone must participate in the conversations to determine how new technologies will affect our future. These are exactly the conversations driving the AI for Good movement. Inclusive dialogue helps new partners to understand their respective roles in nurturing emerging fields of innovation. It helps to clarify the contributions expected of all stakeholders, including the contribution expected of ITU. I'm glad to highlight that the ITU platform continues to support new partnerships advancing AI for health, AI for autonomous driving, and AI and data commons. All partnerships that grew out of the AI for Good Summit. I'm certain that we will see many new partnerships emerging from these upcoming breakthrough days. Friends and colleagues, 2020 has offered a powerful reminder that we are interconnected. Our many connections should help us to share a happy and healthy life together. ICTs remain our primary tool to contend with COVID-19. We have seen another glimpse of the future in associated applications of AI. ICTs are the unifying force at the center of our interconnected world. ICTs are a key part of every discussion about our future. Only by unifying these discussions, working together, will we achieve a trusted technology environment able to improve quality of life worldwide. The events of 2020 have made this clearer than ever before. I want to thank everyone, everywhere, for all that you do to make the AI for Good platform so unique. I thank ITU's co-organizer, the Xprize Foundation, our 37 United Nations partners, and our co-convener, the government of Switzerland. I thank our partner, the Association for Computing Machinery, and our many generous sponsors and supporters. I also thank the diverse range of experts that give life to the AI for Good movement. The AI for Good movement is global, highly inclusive, and moving in exactly the direction the world needs when it comes to deciding how technology should factor into our future. Over the coming 10 days, we will see ambitious projects proposed, and we will move forward together stronger, emboldened by the struggles that we have worked through in 2020. I would like to conclude by wishing everyone a safe and healthy conclusion to 2020. They say fortune favors the brave. I wish you the courage to see through the challenges of 2020 to a future full of promise. Let us look to the future with optimism, with confidence, safe in the knowledge that by staying connected, working together, new technologies can help us to care for each other better and build a better future for all. I thank you. I very much hope you enjoy these upcoming breakthrough days.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for your opening remarks. Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Ms. Anushay Ansari, who's the CEO of Xprize Foundation and our partner in co-organizing the AI Summit. And also they have been leading the development of the breakthrough tracks over the past 6 months. She is also the first female private space explorer and probably knows a thing or two about thinking big. And I think it's safe to say she has a truly unique perspective on global challenges. So Ms. Ansari, I'd like to welcome you. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Let me also join Dr. Lee and our colleagues at ITU to welcome all of you to this session of AI for Good. We always look forward to actually meet everyone and spend time around the snacks and coffee together and have really powerful conversations. But like everyone else, we're adapting to the new world we live in and doing this virtually. But I'm grateful for the time you're giving us because that's the most precious gift that you can all give us and give each other. So we're very happy that we've been able to bring some amazing speakers and collaborators to the table, and hopefully this next 10 days will be very productive for you. I know that we are all on Zoom calls all the time these days. And I heard the other day the terminology Zombie that sometimes best describes all of us. I'm usually staring at the screen a lot of time, not even seeing the other participants. So it makes it difficult to really interact with you. But we're grateful for at least having this opportunity, having the connectivity, having the technology to continue our important work. And I'm very excited to see how we've made the best out of what we have and the level of collaboration and interactivity that we have. At Xprize, we believe that collaboration is the superpower of the 21st century, and It is the collision of these uncommon partnerships and dialogues that creates the most radical ideas. In order for us to get a better sense of who all is in the audience and participating, and what are some of the important issues on top of your mind, and also to test out if you are zooming out or zooming in on this conversation, we have a few questions in a poll that I would like to ask my colleagues at ITU to put up. And if you could take just about a minute or two to answer these questions, we'll be grateful. And then I'll share the result with all of you as well. So can we put the poll up, please? Are you guys received? Okay, here we go. So please just take a few minutes to answer these questions. There are about 4 questions. I think we're ready for the next question. Okay, we're ready for the next question. And I think we have one last one, if I'm not mistaken. And some of these questions you can answer, check all the ones that apply, so please do so. I think that was the last one. So while we tabulate the results and to present it to you, let me just tell you that as you have all experienced, the world has changed around us. When COVID hit every shore, we all thought that it's going to be maybe a few weeks. When it became a month, we thought, okay, maybe a month or two. But here we are, half a year into this pandemic, and that has impacted all of us. It has definitely shined a light on the best part of our societies, those frontline workers, those who risk their lives to keep us safe and keep the world going. And also it has shined a light on the most vulnerable parts of the society. And when we see these types of challenges in front of us at the Xprize, we believe they present the most important opportunities for us to take advantage of and to be able to come up with very important radical solutions. Also, situations like the pandemic introduce a open space for us to really push breakthroughs that otherwise would be difficult to implement. When we look around us, we can see how the world of change has accelerated, how technology deployment has accelerated, how people's acceptance of some new ways of doing things has accelerated. So this presents us an opportunity to be able to really put our thinking caps on and to come up with most radical ideas, which I hope you all will discuss in your breakthrough sessions. Let me see if we can share the results of the poll with you, if that's ready for us. Great. So we have a lot of repeat participants, but a fair number of new people that have joined us. So we're grateful for all the new people who are here with us, and hopefully you'll find it exciting enough and continue to participate. Can we see the next question? I wish I had a music I can play for. I could play for you all while we're waiting. Do we have the result of the next question? Also, a fair distribution around a lot of people who are here to learn the state of AI, and we're also here to learn from you. Let's look at the next question. Don't forget that while you're learning, you can always participate, and there is always room for asking questions and learning even more in-depth knowledge. I'm glad to also see that a lot of you who are here, you're interested to accelerate solutions, because I know as someone who participates in a lot of conferences, I always tend to go back to those who actually take action out of the conversation. And I can promise you the AI for Good Summit is very action oriented, and Xprize, we really believe in taking the conversations into the real world. So this is very encouraging to see. And I believe we have one last question. Wow, a lot of people very focused on the ethics of AI, and one of my favorite subjects, I think, is the second runner-up, which is the lack of diverse data set. I'm very happy that we have a lot of good conversation around those topics, and happy to have you all join us and participate in the conversations. Especially the gender track, as you can imagine, will really focus on the issue of data diversity. It has been an important issue at Xprize that we have looked into, and the group the Brain Trust, who has helped us put the topics together and the conversation, sort of seeding the conversations in the breakthrough sessions, have been really excited about this next 10 days and the participation that we hope to get from all of you. I wanted to now maybe just quickly share a video with you to put you in the mood for collaboration, because as I said, it's difficult to really interact when you're staring at a screen. In the breakthrough sessions, you will have an opportunity to maybe interact more with people who are in the session with you. And as hard as it may be, I think let's use our time really collaboratively and be able to make use of what comes out of here. The work doesn't stop here on these calls. The work actually happens outside once we leave these calls and continue to interact with each other to move the work forward. The world needs us to do this important work, as it is a complex topic that most general public, they don't understand, and they don't feel like they can contribute. So that actually creates a burden or onus on us to make sure that we focus on ethical uses, we focus on equitable uses of AI, and that we make sure that it's used in order to benefit the entire human race. And if there are other beings out there in the universe, that it doesn't harm anyone. So these are really important times. These are really important conversations, and I'm really grateful you're here. So let's watch the video together and get back to starting the actual work. Thank you.
A 1,000 years ago, it was only the kings and queens who could do anything on a national or regional level. Today, it's all of us.
Wildfires are spreading. Black Lives Matter.
28 million cases.
The world's biggest problems represent the world's biggest opportunities.
If you believe in innovation, the thing we need more of now than ever is innovators.
Innovation to solve big, challenging problems.
We are leveraging the genius of folks from all over the world.
People who are not satisfied with the way things are and know that it can be better.
Our platform that we have to speak to the world and show the world solutions has never been stronger.
I'm excited to meet all the entrepreneurs.
We're live with an amazing group of exponential and abundance-minded individuals from around the planet.
To help people really now dig into their imagination, creativity is everywhere.
So thank you again, and let the games begin. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Ms. Ansari, for helping to set the scene and inspire our participants to collaborate and work together for the next 10 days. I'd like to introduce our moderator who will be guiding the remainder of the session. He's no stranger to the summit. His name is Amir Banim Fatemi. He's the Chief Innovation Officer of Xprize, and he's also the chair of the program committee for the AI for Good Global Summit. And he's been working tirelessly with us for the past 4 or 5 years, I can't even count anymore, helping to bring the summit to where it is today. So I leave you in his very capable hands, and Amir, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. As Anushay said, the past 4 years have been wonderful. And also we can say that if we talk about uncommon partnerships, Xprize and ITU has created uncommon partnerships together. These are two organizations that are trying to make impact in the world, and we have together joined forces to do so. As the past 4 years have passed, we have been seeing more than 15,000 people joining forces with us, and we'll learn a lot from all of you. We learned that, as we say in Xprize, that everyone is a problem solver, and we try to invite all problem solvers to join us to talk about how AI can have an impact on society, on the world, on sustainable development goals, and giving every one of us an agency on trying to identify and solve our local problems, whatever they are, and try to do this collaboratively. So it is with great pleasure that we start the next 10 days, and we have an awesome program for you. In the next 3 days, we'll start the breakthrough programs. This will be explained to you by Andrew Tuhert soon, in about an hour. And before that, we'd like to welcome Rhiann Eisler that I'm going to introduce soon. But before we go there, As Anushay and Chesop introduced the day, I would like to ask both of them as uncommon partners, and we've been in this journey together for 4 years. What is your hope in the next 10 days, and how would you invite everyone to join forces to co-create the future?
I have to say lady first.
Okay. As I mentioned, I'm very focused on actions because I think great ideas are a lot around the world. I hear a lot of great ideas. The hard part is putting those ideas into action. And while these workshops and this time we're spending together is very important, the fact that this year we called the AI for Good Summit a movement, and it's something that will be all year around, it's absolutely speaking to the fact that the conversation doesn't end in these sessions in the next 10 days, and the real work has to happen in the world. So I would love if we are together, hopefully in person, in real life, as they say now, next year, and to hear actually how some of the conversations from this year's session has made it into the world and has already started impacting the world. So that's one big hope for this conversation. And two, as a lot of participants mentioned, ethics being a very important part of the work in AI. And I know ITU has been at the forefront of pushing this topic and this conversation forward. I love to see how we can really create a global movement of people who make this one of the most important topics globally on AI for good. And to make sure that there are policymakers who are educated about it and that starts implementing things now that will help us make sure that we focus the energy in development of AI and machine learning toward helping the entire human race.
Yeah, great. I fully concur what Anushay you said, there's no doubt. I just add a couple of things. Still, I'm wondering, I'm a technician, but I'm wondering about many people use of this language AI looks like a magic word. If you can say AI to solve the problems, but actually not. Many communities easily use of this language AI, but we know we still have really rush of our time. We are far behind. And as Anushay, you said, the world is waiting for us. So this is why ITU is working together with Xprize. We want action-oriented. I'm very happy to see many colleagues by the poll response. They want to find some creative solutions. That is the objective of this the breakthrough days. We are really eager to find how we can bring the solutions. Recently, we have a report like during the COVID-19, we have more than 37 million new poor caused by this COVID-19 in the world. So this is now Switzerland is around 7 million, but there's 37 million people becoming new poor. And today is UN 75 years anniversary day. We had some report since this COVID-19, the first priority, whole of the world want access to the basic services like health, clean water, and educations. So all these, the whole of the world need practical solutions. So how we can deliver this practical solution? Wonderful talks is nice, but we are eager now to bring the solutions. So in this regard, these breakthrough days, I'm really excited how the next 10 days, how we continue these conversations to find out the best solutions immediate solutions to bring the world to make people more safe. That's what I expect.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lee and Anushay. These are amazingly encouraging thoughts to get us started. And we hope that everyone here will be able to just join your invitations. Thank you very much. As we talk about partnership and collaboration and coming together, we wanted to start these 10 days with a keynote that best exemplifies this concept of partnership and partnerism and give us a chance to better understand the foundation of partnership. I wanted to introduce you our next keynote, Dr. Rhiann Eisler. Let me introduce her briefly and then welcome us all together. Dr. Rhiann Eisler is a social systems scientist and, of course, a cultural historian, attorney, consultant, and speaker. Her work has transformed organizations, policies, and people worldwide. And her book, her most recent book, Nurturing Our Humanity, How Domination and Partnership Shape Our Brains, Lives, and Future, shows to us how to construct a more equitable, sustainable, and less violent world based on partnership rather than domination. Dr. Eisler is president of the Center for Partnership Studies and also editor-in-chief of the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies at University of Minnesota. She is mostly known as a pioneer in the expansion of human rights theory and actions to include women and children, and her research, writing, and speaking have transformed the lives of people worldwide. She often keynotes in conferences internationally and consults for governments on partnerism and the partnership model. She has authored over 500 articles for outlets ranging from the Christian Science Monitor, the International Journal of Women's Studies, Business Insider, Human Rights Quarterly, and numerous popular presses. And she's the recipient of numerous awards for her work on human rights, peace, and the Foundation for a Better Future. I would like all of you to help me welcome Dr. Eisler today for a unique keynote titled The Foundations for a Sustainable and Equitable New Normal. Dr. Eisler. I think we have a technical. Audio problem, Dr. Eisler. We cannot hear you. Maybe we can verify that sound is checked. Are you muted by any chance? Or Microsoft is connected? Why don't we give you time to check your audio? And if there's a way we can assist you. Is there a way we can help Dr. Eisler? So these are real-time live technical issues that we're facing. Is there a way we can have you on a phone line, or maybe we can send her a separate link? Can you hear us, Dr. Eisler? Okay, so we can hear us, perfect. We can't hear you for some reason. Maybe your microphone is not selected on your settings. People are suggesting for you to disconnect and reconnect. Yes. Thank you everyone for your patience. These are the joys of live programming. And Dr. Ansari made a special effort to be awake on time. She's quite old and made a special effort to join us today. I'm not sure she has someone assist her technically, so we have to hope that this can come back. Oh, you're back. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We just need a louder volume.
It was on your end, I'm afraid. Well, anyway, I'm here.
Wonderful. Sorry for all the difficulties, but we are excited to get started.
I'm excited to be with you too, and I'll start from the beginning.
Thank you so much.
First of all, I really want to thank you, Amir, and I also want to thank all the others who have organized this conference, which is, I think, so important. The title itself recognizes that how AI, like other technological breakthroughs, how it's developed, how it's applied, that it really hinges on our guiding values, which in turn, of course, are embedded in our cultural, social, and economic systems, which is why I am going to be sort of doing the stage setting address, which I'm very happy to do, on foundations for an equitable and sustainable new future, and yes, what we can do to build it in this time of rapid technological and social change. And I too want to start with where we are with the COVID-19 pandemic, because while certainly, it has brought out a lot of good in people. It also, I'm afraid, has demonstrated the fragility, the lack of resilience, not to speak of the inequities and inequalities.
Dr. Eisler, are you able to increase your microphone volume? We can barely hear you.
I don't understand that.
We hear you, but very little. We just need a little bit higher volume on your microphone.
All right, let me go into the microphone. I don't have technical help with me, so can somebody help me find where I go on Zoom to increase the volume? Where do I go?
Dr. Eisner, it's actually not a Zoom function. It will be on your laptop. If you have a PC, usually there is a little icon, like a speaker icon at the bottom of the screen. You can click on that.
All right. I will go into the Apple, because I'm on an Apple PC.
Okay, so if someone who knows Apple can maybe give you directions.
I've never had this problem, but I'll go into the preferences and see what the problem is, because as I said, I just did another keynote yesterday and it was fine. So let me go into that and see what I've got here. I've got, I wish we had done this before, but we didn't, and I apologize if the problem really is I've gone into the sound, and I will put the output and the input much higher. Is this better now? Can you hear me better?
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, I did it, and I will.
Now we can.
Great.
Let us welcome you again, Dr. Eisler. It's a great pleasure. Let's start now. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be wonderful to hear you.
Once more with feeling, huh? All right. Well, listen, as I said, now for
Thank you, Anushay, for assistance.
And thank you, Anushay, yes, for pointing me. I kept looking for something on the Zoom. Anyway, I again want to thank you, Amir, for your introduction, and I want to thank all of you, Amir, Anushay, all of you, for organizing this conference and for inviting me to, so to speak, do the stage setting keynote to it, because the title itself, you know, AI for Good, it recognizes that how AI, like other technological breakthroughs, how it's developed, how it's applied, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. It really hinges on our guiding values, which in turn, of course, are embedded in our cultural, social, and economic systems, which is why I'm going to be talking with you about, as Amir said, about foundations for an equitable and sustainable new normal and what we can do to build it in this time of rapid technological and social change, including the rapid development and implementation of AI. And I too want to start with where we are with the COVID-19 pandemic, because even though yes, it has brought out and showed us how much good there is in so many of us, it has also revealed the fragility, the lack of resilience, not to speak of the inequities and inequalities of our present social, cultural, economic systems. So we hear a lot today, don't we, about returning to normal. But I don't think we want to do that. If we really think about it, even before this pandemic, like in the wealthy United States, 1/4 of all children lived in poverty. Billions worldwide lived and live in poverty, not to speak of the fact that we've been literally destroying our natural life support systems. So what I'm going to be talking with you about is building a new normal. A new normal I call partnerism. And I know that partnerism is probably a new term, well, for many of you, but you know, Einstein put it very well. He said, we cannot solve problems with the same thinking that created them. We need new thinking. And as those of you familiar with my work with books such as The Chalice and the Blade, which by the way is now in its 57th US printing and about 40 foreign editions. And again, to fast forward to my most recent book, which came out a few months ago with Oxford University Press, Nurturing Our Humanity. As you know, my work has been dedicated to new thinking, especially to how we can bring about a more just and caring world. A world in which AI and other technological breakthroughs like biotechnology, nanotechnology will actually be used for the common good. So I want to ask you to begin with to step out of your comfort zones and to take a fresh look at the old categories that we've been all taught, you know, because if you really think, and this does require new thinking, about these conventional social and economic categories that we've all been taught, you know, you see that there have been repressive, violent, unjust regimes in every one of them, whether they're right or left, east or west, religious or secular, socialist or capitalist, northern and southern, and so forth. None of them tell us what we need in order to create a better world. And not only that, and this is really critical, these conventional categories, if you really think about it freshly, they marginalize or just ignore the majority of humanity, women and children. So what I've introduced is a new, more inclusive and holistic way of looking at our social, economic, cultural systems, because that's what we need to start with to create a better world. And this is the new lens of the partnership, domination, social scale, which I want to add is the impetus for the growing partnerism movement to accelerate the shift from the domination side to the partnership side. So we've got a lot to cover, but I would like to start on a personal note because my passion, and yes, I have a lot of passion for this work, it's really deeply rooted in my own childhood. I was born in Europe at a time of massive regression to the domination side of the partnership domination social scale. It was the rise of the Nazis, first in Germany, then in my native Austria. So from one day to the next, my parents and I, we became hunted with license to kill. And I was a very small child, but I still remember how I watched with horror as a gang of Gestapo men broke into our home, dragged my father away. And it was by a miracle, only by a miracle, that my mother actually obtained his release and we were able to escape by a hair's breadth to Cuba, where I grew up in the industrial slums of Havana because, yeah, the Nazis confiscated, you know, that's an official word for armed robbery, isn't it? They confiscated everything my parents had. And there I experienced and witnessed another injustice, the terrible poverty, the enormous gaps between haves and have-nots at that time in Cuba. And it was also there that I learned that most of my extended family, my aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, were murdered by the Nazis in the Holocaust, as would have happened to my parents and me, had we not by a miracle escaped. Now, these traumatic experiences obviously had a huge impact on me, and they led me to the questions that eventually led to my research. Questions that I think many of you have probably asked at some point in your lives. Questions like why, when I saw in my mother, who really risked her life out of love on that crystal night that I just told you about, many Jewish people were killed that night. Why, when we have such an enormous human capacity for consciousness, for caring, for creativity, why has there been so much destructiveness, so much cruelty, so much insensitivity and violence? Is it, as we're often told, inevitable, just quote human nature, or are there alternatives? And if so, what are they? And yes, I found that there are alternatives. There is an alternative. But of course, I did not start my research until much later. And when I did, it became clear, as I said, that I could not answer these questions looking at societies through the lenses of conventional categories, or for that matter, of conventional studies of society, that to answer them actually requires looking at the whole of society and not marginalizing the majority of humanity. Also, I drew from a database that includes the whole of our lives, including where we all live, our family, and other intimate relations. And yes, the whole of our history, including the millennia we call prehistory. And when you do this, you can see social configurations that keep repeating themselves historically and cross-culturally. And really configurations that are otherwise invisible. The configurations of what I've called the domination system and the partnership system. Now, the good news is that we don't have to start from square one to move to partnership-oriented societies again. And I say again, because there is today enormous evidence dispelling the old story, that story that's so vividly and graphically depicted in that caveman cartoon, that we're all familiar with, that we actually think nothing of showing children before their brains, including much less their critical faculties are developed. He's holding a club, a weapon in one hand, and he's dragging a woman by the hair with the other. So what does it tell us? Well, it tells us that too bad, but it's always been this way. And by implication, it always will be violence, injustice, male dominance. That's just human nature. Now, that is a false story. We today know that for thousands and thousands of years in our prehistory, societies oriented more to the partnership side of the partnership domination social scale. They were not ideal, but they were, and they were more egalitarian, they were more gender balanced. Children were not terrorized into submission. Violence, starting with the family, all the way to intergroup relations, was not the norm. In fact, we're learning from archaeology, anthropology, linguistics, even DNA studies, that warfare is at the most 5,000 to 10,000 years old, which is really, if you think about it, a drop in the evolutionary bucket. So for most of our human adventure here on Earth, we did not live in domination-oriented societies, which are themselves, they brought in warfare. They're themselves just a recent development in our cultural evolution starting about 5,000 to 10,000 years ago. Not only that, if we look at history, recorded history, written history, through the lens of the partnership domination social scale, we see that, well, if you look at modern history, for example, it's not just, as we're taught in our schools, this random collection of events, because what we can then see is modern history is a strong movement towards partnership systems countered by enormous domination, resistance, and yes, punctured by periodic regressions like the one that we're seeing worldwide today. What we can see, and this is really important, is that despite their differences, every progressive social movement has actually challenged the same thing, a tradition of domination. Think about it. The Enlightenment, the so-called rights of man movement, what did it challenge? It challenged the so-called divinely ordained right of kings to rule over their subjects. The feminist, later women's rights, women's liberation movements challenged again the supposedly divinely ordained right of men to rule over the women and children in the castles of their homes. Think about the anti-slavery, the later civil rights, anti-colonial, the Black Lives Matter movements. They challenge another tradition of domination, the so-called, again, once considered divinely ordained right of a supposedly superior race to rule over inferior ones. The movements for social and economic equity challenge top-down rule and control. The peace movement, and more recently, the movement to stop violence against women and children, which is still a global pandemic, which is finally gaining some attention as we're moving a little bit more towards partnership. They challenge the use of force to impose one's will on others, all the way to the environmental movement, which challenges, well, our once hallowed conquest and domination of nature, which at this level of technological development could take our species to an evolutionary dead end. But, and this is very important, if you look more closely, you see that these movements focus primarily on dismantling what I call the top of the domination pyramid, politics and economics as conventionally defined, which left in place the foundations on which the pyramid keeps rebuilding itself in regression after regression, whether it's secular, like Nazi Germany on the right, or Stalin's Soviet Union on the left, or religious, like so-called religious fundamentalism, which if you really think about it, it's domination, fundamentalism. What's it about? It's about top-down control, isn't it, in both the family and the state or tribe. It can be Eastern or Western, Northern or Southern, like Khomeini's Iran, ISIS, Boko Haram in Africa, the Taliban in Afghanistan and Pakistan, or the rightist fundamentalist alliance in the United States, which has for the last decades had so much influence in US policies. So if we are to prevent these regressions and all the harm they do, if we are to build a more equitable and sustainable caring world where, yes, technological breakthroughs like AI are really used for the common good, we've got to pay attention, much more attention, to the foundations on which politics, economics rest. Because unless we shift these foundations, we'll continue to have regressions with all the suffering they bring. And yes, AI and other technological breakthroughs will be used in service of domination, be it of people or of nature, rather than for the common good. All of which takes me to what I want to use the rest of our time together to discuss: 4 cornerstones that we have to shift from domination to partnership. And as you can see, these are quite different from what the mainstream conversation, as well as the academic conversation, has been, at least until now. And these are the cornerstones for either a domination system or a partnership oriented. It's always a matter of degree. Now, the first cornerstone that we have to shift from domination to partnership is childhood. Why? Well, we know today from both biological and social science that what children first experience and observe directly impacts how our brains develop, and hence how we think, how we feel, how we act, including how we vote, what kinds of policies we support, and yes, how we develop and apply technological breakthroughs. This is detailed in Nurturing Our Humanity, my new book, which has so many findings from neuroscience showing, well, what we today know, that our brain's neural pathways are not set at birth. The issue is not genes. We've been told a false story. We have a capacity, yes, for cruelty, for violence, for insensitivity. We see that, but we also have an enormous capacity. Indeed, as we show through really study after study in Nurturing Our Humanity, if anything, we are wired more for caring and sharing than for dominating and for violence. But we've been told a false story because the issue is really gene expression. And yes, the first years, childhood, are the time when our brains develop in interaction with our environments, which of course for us humans are primarily, aren't they, cultural. And yes, they are very different depending on the degree of orientation of our families, of education, religion, everything, to either the domination or the partnership configuration. So consider that when family relations are based on chronic violations of human rights, as they are in rigid domination systems, where these are considered normal, even moral, children acquire a mental and emotional model for accepting these violations in all relations. And if they are violent, and this is really important, children learn that violence from the more powerful to the less powerful is an acceptable way of imposing your will on others, of controlling others. Now, fortunately, there are people who reject these teachings, but many others replicate them, not only in intimate relations, but also in national and international ones. So what happens? They'll vote for and accept punitive policies and practices. They'll accept and even yearn for strongman rule. They'll go into denial about their own childhood experiences and instead divert their pain and rage into what we see so much of resurging today, scapegoating the groups that their authority figures tell them are to blame for all their troubles. All the convoluted psychosocial dynamics we are today finally examining. Now, fortunately, we can change all through life, but studies from neuroscience also show that for people from rigid domination backgrounds, where caring is inextricably connected with coercion and often with fear and with violence, fear of force, it is very difficult to change. And indeed, we have studies today showing that this difficulty is actually reflected in how the brain is structured, which of course helps to explain climate change denial and other inabilities to adapt to change or even accept change. So what do we do? Well, the first step is recognizing the problem. We're finding out today through studies such as the ACEs, or Adverse Childhood Experiences study, that even in the United States, where genital mutilation, child marriage, child violence in schools as well as in families, and terrible violence, where they're not culturally accepted, that the highly stressful childhood experiences found in domination-oriented cultures and subcultures are still very prevalent, and we have to change that. Now, the good news, again, is we have many resources today for partnership rather than domination parenting, for authoritative rather, because children do need limits, rather than authoritarian and nonviolent parenting, or for other caregivers of children. And one of these I want to point you to is the Caring and Connected Parenting Guide, based on the latest neuroscience, which you can download for free in both English and Spanish at centerforpartnership.org, a site that, by the way, has many more resources, many more useful tools, which takes us directly to the second cornerstone for a new and better normal, gender. And I'm so glad you've got a gender track. But, again, we've been taught that how gender roles and relations are culturally constructed, that's just a women's issue, just a gender issue. In reality, as you will see, it is a central social, economic, and technological issue that directly affects all of us, women, men, everybody in between, children of all genders, and even beyond that, that directly affects what we are taught is or is not valuable, which is very important in terms of AI, isn't it? Let's start with what children learn about what it means to be a girl or a boy, a woman or a man in rigid domination systems. Actually, they learn another lesson necessary for the imposition or maintenance of these kinds of systems, because what they're taught is to equate difference, beginning with the fundamental difference in our species between the female and male forms, with superiority or inferiority, dominating or being dominated, being served or serving, hardly a model for social, racial, economic equity, because when children acquire this mental and emotional template, as I said, before their brains are fully formed, much less their critical faculty, they have a template that they can automatically apply to other differences, whether it's a different race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation. So in parts of the Middle East, it can be Shia versus Sunni, or Sunni versus Shia. In the US, it can be racism. In the Europe where I grew up and resurging worldwide today, it can be anti-Semitism or anti-immigrant, or scapegoating a different sexual orientation. Simply put, what they get a template for is in-group versus out-group thinking. And that's not all. Children in domination cultures and subcultures also learn yet another key lesson through gender and how it's constructed in domination systems that's foundational to imposing and maintaining these systems. And that this is really critical. They learn that not only women, but anything that is stereotypically associated with women, has nothing to do with anything inherent in women or men, which of course includes caring, caregiving, and nonviolence, which we're told are not appropriate for real men, right? They are not as important as anything associated with men and so-called hard masculine activities like conquest and domination. So what have we inherited from more rigid domination times? A gendered system of values that we really have to unpack, because along with the subordination of the female half of humanity comes the subordination of part of our humanity, an essential part of our humanity in both women and men: caring, caregiving, nonviolence, and other traits and activities that are in domination systems. stereotypically associated with femininity. And this gendered system of values actually affects women, of course, girls very much so. You know, in some parts of the world, for example, girls are still deprived of education, deprived of healthcare, even of food in times of hardship. But it actually affects us negatively, everyone, because, and we at the Center of Partnership Studies, by the way, back in 1995, did a study using statistical data from 89 nations. It's a study called Women, Men, and the Global Quality of Life, showing that connection, that the status of women is actually a powerful predictor of everyone's quality of life. And since then, other studies have verified these connections. For example, the World Economic Forum's gender gap reports, they also confirm the correlation between the status of women and economic success. And, you know, there are many studies, McKinsey and so on, but they focus on depriving half the population of equal opportunities, which certainly deprives societies of enormous contribution. But think about it. As long as women are devalued, so are policies considered soft or feminine in domination systems. And I'll give you some examples. Somehow, there always seems to be money for these hard priorities, for prisons. Well, what is that really? It's the dominator stereotype of the punitive male head of household, isn't it? Or there seems to be always enough money for weapons, for wars. And, you know, as a Holocaust survivor, I think that we need some defense, certainly. But, you know, it's gotten completely out of kilter here. But what really is that? It's what we learn to admire, to idealize. It's the dominator stereotype of the violent hero. All of which takes me to the third and really vital cornerstone, that we have to shift from domination to partnership economics, but economics from a new perspective that goes beyond the tired old argument about capitalism versus socialism and vice versa. Remember, capitalist and socialist economic theory actually came out of early, very early industrial times, out of the 1700s and the 1800s. So on that count alone, they would be antiquated in our 21st century knowledge service post-industrial era. But even more importantly, both came out of times that oriented much more closely to the domination system, a time when caring for people, starting in early childhood and keeping a clean and healthy home environment, which of course is also related to keeping a clean and healthy planetary environment, as you'll see, when it was to be performed by women for free in male-controlled households. For example, even in the mid-1800s, when Marx wrote, in many places, if a woman was negligently injured, she could not sue for her injuries. Only her husband could for loss of her services. So Adam Smith, Karl Marx, they failed to recognize the economic value of this, quote, women's work. And for both of them, nature was there to be exploited. If you look at their theories, there is nothing in either capitalist or socialist theory about the vital importance of caring for people or for nature. Both of these theories, as I detail in my book, The Real Wealth of Nations, are based on a flawed, incomplete model of economics, which fails to include the three vital life-sustaining economic sectors: the natural economy, the volunteer community economy, and the household economy. So what we need is what we haven't had, a new caring economics of partnerism that gives real value and rewards caring for people, starting in childhood and caring for nature. And of course, again, the COVID-19 pandemic shows that, who are our essential workers? They do care work, health care, child care, or they provide food and other necessities that sustain life, just like nature sustains life. Now, a very, very important first step, because I've been called a practical visionary, and I'm always thinking of what are the tools for really positive change. A very important first step is changing our measures of economic health. Think about GDP. Which is finally beginning to be widely criticized, but is still the most widely used measure of economic health. Well, it actually includes activities that harm and take life. Think about making cigarettes, selling cigarettes, and the resulting medical and funeral costs. They're all great for GDP, goes up. The same is true of oil spills, the cleanup costs, the the litigation, the depositions. But not only does GDP put in negatives in as positives and cause a lot of what we need, quote, externalities, it fails to include the huge economic value of the work of caring for people in households, even though we are beginning to quantify its economic value. For instance, an Australian report showed that if the unpaid caring household work were included, it would comprise 50% of the reported GDP. Now that's huge, yet none of this information is found in conventional economic treatises. It's not taught in our schools and universities, and it's up to us, to all of us, to you, to see that it is. And this is why I want to stay with this for a while, because I want to invite you to help us make visible a new metric, a new measure of economic health that we developed at the Center for Partnership Studies, Social Wealth Economic Indicators, or SWAYs. Unlike GDP, and unlike most other so-called GDP alternatives, these metrics, the social wealth economic indicators, provide empirical evidence of the enormous economic value of the work of caring for people, starting in childhood, in terms of human capacity development, which of course is the most important economic asset, isn't it, in our new knowledge service age, but also of caring for nature. And SWAYs are really unique in so many ways. They take into account what we know from neuroscience, the vital importance of what children experience and observe in their early years, especially from 1 to 5, when we're told 85% of the structure of our brain is laid. Now, we're now in the process of updating and condensing what are 24, it's a lot, of social wealth economic indicators into one number, so that government and business policymakers have the missing data they need, so they can see connection. For example, the social wealth economic indicators show that the United States lags far behind other developed nations in investing in family support, in education for young children, in all kinds of care activities, really. And of course, this, not coincidentally, the United States has the highest child poverty rate, the highest maternal mortality, the highest infant mortality rate of any OECD nation. And you can find out more at centerforpartnership.org or at partnerism.org. So yes, and I really want to stay with how cost-effective caring for people starting in childhood and caring for nature is. to begin with, there's this idea, well, yeah, this is all very nice, but we have to be cost effective. Well, we have a lot of data. It's in my book, The Real Wealth of Nations, as well as in these websites, that businesses that have caring policies and the partnership structures that go with this do extremely well, but so also do nations. And I want to stay with that. Because fortunately, here again, we don't have to start from scratch. There are trends in this direction, and we clearly see these. If we look at nations that at the beginning of the 20th century were so poor that they had famines, nations such as Finland, Norway, and Sweden, nations that are today regularly in the highest ranks of the World Economic Forum's global competitiveness reports, as well as in the highest ranks of the World Happiness Reports. Not coincidentally, these nations pioneered caring policies, government-supported childcare, universal health care, stipends to help families care for children, elder care with dignity, very generous paid parental leave for both mothers and fathers, all of which are really lacking in so much of our world. But these policies and the resulting high lifespans, low poverty rates, low crime rates, and a generally high standard of living for all, they didn't happen in a vacuum. And no, they didn't happen because they're socialists. These are not socialist nations. They have very healthy market economies. Nor did it happen, as we're sometimes told, well, because they're relatively small and homogeneous. Think of all the nations that are relatively small and homogeneous that do not have caring policies, that orient to the domination side. It happened because these are the contemporary nations that have moved most closely to the partnership side of the partnership domination scale. They're not ideal, but first, they have more democracy and equality in both the family and the state. Second, they have the lowest gender gaps. Third, they're in the forefront of trying to leave behind traditions of violence and domination. This is very important. They pioneered the first peace studies, the first laws prohibiting physical discipline of children and families, which, by the way, is a very important trend. About 50 nations have, at least on the books, adopted these kinds of laws. And I want to get back to gender. You have a gender track. These nations really do have a much more equal partnership between women and men. 40 to 50% of their national legislators are female. And what happens, and this is really very important, we need to understand these interactive dynamics. As the status of women rises, men, and women too, but men no longer find it such a threat to their status, to their masculinity, to also embrace more caring practices and policies. So we're back to connecting the dots and recognizing the key importance of the status of women and children for a nation's politics, economics, everything. And by the way, this is essential for cutting through seemingly intractable cycles of poverty worldwide, because it isn't just gender discrimination, it's the valuation of care work of women and anything stereotypically associated with women, such as the work of care, still primarily performed by women for little or no pay in most world regions. That's a major reason that the mass of the world's poor and the poorest of the poor are women and children, that in the wealthy United States, women, most of them who are or were either full or part-time caregivers, are almost twice as likely to live in poverty than men of the same age. Now, we have to connect the dots. We have to help our policymakers connect the dots, all of which takes me to the fourth cornerstone, which we've already, of course, talked about, stories and language. Now, many of the stories we've inherited really reinforce domination systems, domination thinking. I've already said how our conventional categories, well, a colleague of mine calls them weapons of mass distraction, because they fragment our consciousness. But think about the story about human nature, whether it's original sin or selfish genes, it's the same story. So I don't know why they're arguing with each other. The story is we're bad. There's something wrong with us. So we have to be rigidly controlled from the top. Fairy tales. I mean, talk about gender stereotypes here. And you have to have rigid gender stereotypes, by the way, if you're going to rank one kind of human over another, a male human over a female human. And as I said, this has nothing to do with anything inherent in women and men. Women internalize this system just as much as men do. But think about poor Sleeping Beauty. She can't even wake up unless a guy kisses her. And think of how men are devalued, boys are devalued if they express their full humanity, their sensitivity, their caring. They're marked, aren't they, as sissies, as wimps, even, as I said, by women who are indoctrinated with these values of domination. So this takes me back to language. Why do we need new terms? Well, linguistic psychologists have long told us something we really need to take into consideration. The categories provided by a language, and this is particularly true of our social categories, they channel our thinking. So it's almost impossible to think of other alternatives. And that's why this new language of the partnership system, the domination system, of partnerism, of the partnership domination scale is so important if we're really to move forward and avoid these terrible regressions. We also need other terms. I've coined terms like a distinction between what I call hierarchies of domination. We all know about those. You better obey or else, and hierarchies of actualization, where responsibility, respect, benefit don't just flow from the bottom up, but both ways. And there are trends in this direction. So look, I want to close because, well, our time is up. But I want to say that the struggle for our future, as I think I've made clear, is not between religion and secularism, East and West, right and left, capitalism and socialism. Look at the two mass applications of socialism in the former Soviet Union and in China, but between the domination elements in all our cultures and the partnership norms we urgently need. And yes, so also is the struggle of whether or not AI and other technological breakthroughs, biotechnology, nanotechnology, whether they are or are not used for the common good. There's so much more I would like to share, but I do need to close. And I want to close on a note of action. I want to invite you all to join me in the partnerism movement to accelerate the shift from domination to partnership worldwide. Yes, we have to continue our short-term work. We have to see, for example, that governments no longer subsidize activities that are causing climate change, that are destroying our natural life support systems. But if we are to prevent losing the gains already made, if we are to prevent the regressions to domination that cause so much misery and destruction, we also have to do the long-term work. So I invite you to join me in the work of cultural transformation, focusing on these four cornerstones of childhood, gender, economics, and narratives and language. None of us can do everything, but everyone can do something to build the foundations for a more equitable, caring, and sustainable new normal of partnerism. And you in the AI community, actually, because of the power of this new technology, can play a major role in this. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Rhiann. This was not only a great talk, but helped us really frame the concept of collaboration that we are so much promoting in terms of using AI. We're a bit of behind schedule, but I'd like to, if you're okay, to ask you maybe one or two questions without delaying too much. You talked about the power of social wealth and how new tools of data and AI can help with collaboration and social wealth. Can you tell us what you think about how domination economics and usage of AI incorrectly can create artificial scarcities instead of artificial abundance or new abundance? I think we lost you again on the sound.
Can you hear?
We heard you briefly.
I keep unmuting and
You're perfect now.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect, yes.
Oh my gosh, I tell you, this new technology is wonderful, except when it doesn't work, right? But anyway, you know, as I said, the problem is not capitalism. I mean, the COVID-19 pandemic showed that we need both trade, both markets, and government policies, but it depends on whether they're informed by caring for people starting in childhood and caring for nature or not. What we really have the problem with is what I call domination economics. And they go back to way back to Chinese emperors and to Arab sheiks and to Indian pashas, to feudalism. I mean, think about it for a moment. What in the world is really so-called trickle-down economics? It's domination economics where, as in feudal times, those at the bottom are supposed to content themselves, right, with the scraps dropping from the opulent tables of those on top. So this is why we really have to change our thinking. But we also need to understand that domination economics is very inefficient because it creates artificial scarcities. And it's not only by misdistribution of resources to those on top. It is, first of all, by the waste of resources in this chronic warfare, weapons, etc., you know, an enormous drain. It also fails to invest in the work of caring for people starting in childhood, which, as we know today from neuroscience, is so fundamental, especially in our post-industrial age, when you know, economists even never tire of telling us that the most important capital is that high quality human capital of resilient, flexible people who can work in teams, who can adapt to change. Well, we know now from neuroscience that whether or not that kind of high quality human capital is or is not produced largely hinges on the quality of care and education children receive early on, which takes us right back to this whole gendered system of values, doesn't it? You know, I want to make a point here, Amir. Yes, partnership systems are more conducive to collaboration. But this said, we have to really understand that we're talking about configurations here. People cooperate all the time in domination systems, oil cartels, monopolies, terrorists, criminal gangs, they all cooperate, don't they? So that is not the issue that we always have to keep in mind, is what are our guiding values? And that in turn is embedded in the degree to which a society orients to either the domination or the partnership side of the social scale. Now I can't hear you.
Thank you again, dear Rhiann. We are behind time, unfortunately, but it has been wonderful. I'm sure we have many questions unanswered, and maybe we can invite you at the closing days to share with you some of the findings and get your input on how those can actually participate in partnerism.
Well, I am counting on you because you have a wonderful and powerful technology that really can be used for the common good. So I'm counting on you to use that technology to accelerate this shift, which, as I said, we don't have to start from square one, from domination to partnership, and avoid these terrible regressions. So thank you so much, and I apologize again for all the technical difficulties.
It was our pleasure, and we've managed to to get a chance to listen to you. By the way, technology by itself is not enough. I think we need frameworks, and your words have been inspiring. Thank you again, and we'll invite you for the closing to share some of the learnings with you as well. Thank you again, Dr.
I'd love that. Thank you so much, and goodbye, everyone, and thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to now invite Andrew Tohert, my colleague and the coordinator of this breakthrough series. We have been working with our Brain Trust for about 6 months now to bring to you a selection of projects that are a candidate for co-creation. And by co-creation, we mean it has been initiated by the Brain Trust as framing themes, and also a number of organizations and researchers and entrepreneurs have proposed ideas to be selected for this series of workshops. And Andrew will explain all of that to you soon. This is for us a very exciting moment, and we'd like to get it going and kicked off today and the next following days. So without further ado, Andrew is a VP of Partnership and Strategic Engagement, and also leading data collaborative effort at Xprize, and it's my pleasure to welcome you, Andrew.
Thank you, Amir, and thank you everybody for joining and for attending and for this opportunity here. So building on what Amir said, yeah, the next 3 days are really focused on a series of workshops where we're hoping to really identify, generate, and fuel a number of projects that have already been cultivated for some time now. Of course, in so doing, as you've heard as well, we've divided those into 3 tracks, that being gender equity, future of food, and collective pandemic intelligence. And that allowed us to, of course, categorize these, but then there's a lot of work that had to go into, even within these tracks, which are somewhat narrowed down, where will the focus be? What are the themes within those tracks? What would be meaningful projects within those tracks? And obviously that's a daunting task. So to help us drive that decision-making and thought leadership, we did, as Amir pointed out, convene a brain trust, a series of individuals who operate across each of those three categories. And really over the last many months, these brain trusts have been getting together to both put the focus on the track, engage some of the, or many of the submissions, of which there have been many from the crowd for candidate projects, work with them to really refine where the focus might be, and really ready them for now the next 3 days, where your involvement can come in. So in the next few minutes here, I'm going to first introduce you to the Brain Trust themselves. We have a representative from each of the 3 Brain Trust tracks on the session with us here, and let them talk a bit about each of those tracks. And then after that, we'll jump into a bit of the logistics of what the next 3 days will look like. We'll start with gender equity. And for gender equity, our Brain Trust, the representative of the Brain Trust here is Oscar Bestavros from Boston University. So Oscar, I would like if you could, of course, introduce yourself to the community here, but then also share with us a little bit about what this has been like on the gender equity breakthrough track. How is it that you chose some of the tracks that you did end up or themes within that track that you ended up using, and really a sense as to what some of those project submissions have been like that you've seen over the last few months. Oscar?
Oh, thank you, Andrew, and thanks everybody for joining. So yeah, let me maybe provide a quick introduction to who I am and answer your question, Andrew. So I'm a professor of computer science and the associate provost for computing and data sciences at Boston University. My own research is on developing practical and scalable platforms for privacy-preserving data analytics, things like aggregated analysis, federated learning, et cetera. using a particular technology called secure multi-party computation. To make this sort of just in plain words, it's really about how can we extract knowledge and insights from very highly sensitive, confidential, and private data assets that are impossible to share. So that's my research. Now, how did I get interested and involved in the AI for Good, and in particular in the gender equity breakthrough track? One of the major projects that I've done on privacy-preserving data analysis was started in 2014, and it was about tracking gender pay gap in the city of Boston. We are talking about almost 200,000 employees in the city, working for over 100 organizations. And we wanted to base the analysis, we wanted to track the gender pay equity over time and to see what affects it. We wanted to rely on data that is real data as opposed to sampling and all that. So we really wanted to access the payroll information in these 100 plus companies, which is very sensitive data that you cannot simply ask for and nobody will give it to you. So we deployed the technology and it worked. This project now is going on its 5th year with reports done annually showing how the gender pay gap is improving or not in different types of companies and across gender, race, etc. This is so far a unique project, but it sort of highlighted the importance of fixing the false choice between privacy and utility from data. There's always this sort of tug of war. Well, the data is very private, whether it's medical, whether it's about even corporate data, etc., and our ability to use that data for public good, things like AI and so on. So I got really interested in that, and this is how I got connected to the AI for Good. Our work for the gender equity breakthrough started in early spring, and I have to acknowledge also my co-lead on this track, Francesca Rossi, who actually will be making presentations during workshops. Going online with the summit gave us an opportunity also to work with more teams for a more extended period of time, and sort of to cultivate the projects and eventually select those that we want to proceed with. So the early stages focused on providing early feedback. We got a good number of submissions. I'll talk about them in a second. We sort of converged on a set of 3, helping them refine their ideas. And also we selected a set of mentors, expert mentors, who did a fantastic job in advising the teams as they refined their ideas and responded to some of the questions we had. So Andrew, you asked about what sort of themes we focused on in the gender equity track. We had 3 topics that we really focused on. And let me just go through them very quickly. The first topic was, how can diverse data sets be identified and collectively leveraged to give a more complete picture of gender inequality and to allow for evidence-based policymaking? So as we all know, a lot of AI and machine learning uses data, and if the data is biased, then AI is going to be biased. So the question is, how can we uncover data sets that are more diverse so that we can tackle that particular thorny issue of bias in AI? The second question, or second theme, is how can AI systems be designed to help in human decision making to be more gender inclusive? Not all AI systems make decisions. They sometimes support decision making by humans. And the question is, how can we design the AI system to help make humans actually more inclusive and less biased? And the third question is to identify technical as well as non-technical ways to define, detect, and evaluate gender bias, including from various sources. It could be the algorithm itself introducing bias or the data, etc. So these were the three main themes, and the projects that we got were aligned with at least one of those, if not more. We received about 22 projects, a couple of dozen projects, which we narrowed down to a set of 7 that the mentors helped sort of coach and eventually helped us select the final 3. A few words about the submissions. They were really impressive in their diversity, the project ideas, whether it's related to the AI technologies considered, from natural language processing, topic modeling, sensor networks. We even had some on drone technologies and how it can affect gender equity. The sources of AI bias, whether it's data, algorithms, or system implementation. The team composition was also very impressive. We had teams that represented small companies, nonprofits, university research teams, very interesting collaborations. And the goals of the projects were also very diverse, from attempting to define gender bias to providing scoring mechanisms for bias, to assist humans find where their AI systems are biased, inclusive design, even helping with career advancement in terms of how women can be more successful in fundraising from venture capitalist fundraising activities. So I'm going to stop here. I think it just gives you an idea of the sort of the track and the range of projects we got. It's going to be very exciting. 3 days coming up, and I, please join us tomorrow to find out more about the 3 finalists. Thank you, Andrew.
I think video may have froze. Can folks still hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
I think hopefully it wasn't my video that froze, so I will continue on. So thank you, Eisler, appreciate that, and thank you. I think we will all benefit from the amount of work that has gone into selecting these projects and getting them ready for these workshops. And again, I'll provide some more details around that later on. So maybe we'll transition to the next track, which is the future of food. And for that, we're lucky to have Lauren Fries as one of the chairs of that track. And I'll ask Lauren if you would do the same as well. If you could introduce yourself to the AI for Good community that's on the call here, and similarly a bit about the track and your involvement and the themes and within it and those projects. Lauren.
Thank you, Andrew, and hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, wherever you may be in the world. I am very passionate about food systems, as you will see, and I'm honored to co-chair this.
Murphy is striking today. Can are people able to hear Lauren?
Yes, we are.
Terrific. Well, terrific. I'm hearing from Amir that you can hear me, and I see that in the chat as well. Andrew, it may be a connection problem on your side. I know we're short on time, so perhaps I'll go along, but please, other facilitators, stop me if I'm having audio troubles on my side. So I'm honored to co-chair this Brain Trust with Maren Doles of Danone in collaboration with many others. I lead a strategic advising firm called Future Table, focused on the future of food systems, how we can use technology and innovation towards greater nutrition, regeneration, and equity. And I am really pleased to be working with Xprize on this, having worked with Xprize on some breakthrough opportunities in this space in the past, and bringing some expertise with work I did at the World Economic Forum over several years and in places like Uganda. So I'm going to be using a couple of terms here. Let me just make sure I explain what I mean by them. The first is I'll be talking a little bit about food systems. You may have heard the terms farm to fork or the value chain. That's essentially the way that food comes to us from wherever it's grown, or maybe it's caught in the sea. And that's a chain. It's sort of a chain of events that brings the food to where it's eaten. But actually, this system is much broader than that. It concerns water, it concerns climate, it concerns farmers' livelihoods and food safety. So the food system is actually bigger than that, and it's interlocked in complex ways. And that's what we're really talking about here. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about the design of food systems. And you may say, well, what does that mean? Well, systems thinkers, those who recognize the complexity of systems, recognize that they're designed in certain ways. We prioritize certain things, especially the people who have a lot of power through policy or through the marketplace. And we held as a premise within our group that the food system is currently designed to meet certain goals, like producing a lot of calories and trying to feed the world with them. And it works in certain ways, but it doesn't work very well in some fundamental ways. So for instance, we've optimized for calories rather than nutrition, or we've optimized for yield rather than regenerative systems that actually sustain our soil and other aspects of our ecosystem for the long term. So that's what I mean when I talk about food system design. So what did we do within our brain trust? So we sort of set ourselves a North Star goal. We said, what are we trying to solve for here? And we said, well, that goal, we're going to articulate it as accelerating the transition towards food systems that are designed for positive social, ecological, and nutritional impacts. And all of this in the spirit of the SDGs. So I just said a lot of words, what I mean by it. So designed for positive social stewardship, so shared prosperity among farmers, among CEOs, et cetera, and principles of equity. Ecological stewardship, so prioritization of regenerative impacts. How can we, for instance, draw down carbon from the atmosphere into our soils? And then health and nutrition, recognizing that we really need to enable access to and consumption of healthy food. And so that led us to the 3 prompting questions that we put out to those who responded to this challenge. And you haven't yet heard me say artificial intelligence or machine learning. That's because we see these as tools, extraordinarily powerful tools in the toolbox of getting towards these aspects of the North Star that I've described. So the first question, the prompt that we put out there was, how might we use AI and ML to establish the correlation between growing practices and the nutritional value of food? And that was important to us because half the world is malnourished right now, either undernourished or overnourished. And if we don't have the ability to link how we produce food with how we can become healthier as a society and actually incentivize that, then we're going to continue to go down the wrong path. So that's extraordinarily complex. And so we really felt that AI and ML could be a portion of that solution set. The second question was, how might we use AI to design resilient food systems that better anticipate, adapt to, and or mitigate shocks? Now, resiliency is critical. We've seen this nowhere more profoundly than this year in the context of the pandemic, which exposed many of the vulnerabilities of our food systems and redoubled the efforts of those who think about food system design to focus on resiliency. And it's not just things like pandemics that really send shocks through food systems. It's droughts, it's locusts, it's market failures, it's conflict that leads to migration. It's many things that can be looked at through the lens of artificial intelligence, through approaches to big data to understand what might happen and to prepare to mitigate the negative shocks of that, so that we can optimize for the experience of everyone involved in the food system, especially those who would otherwise potentially go hungry as a result of those shocks. The third question we asked was, how might we use AI to leverage diverse data sets to develop a more complete picture on the impact of food choices? So again, a lot of words. The essence is, when you stand in a grocery store or you go to a restaurant, if anyone goes to restaurants anymore, or you are responsible for purchasing food for your school or your company, you are making a choice that embodies a lot of things beyond the taste or the price or the convenience of that item. It embodies an amount of water that was used. It embodies an amount of carbon. It embodies the treatment of the farmers. And so where we can use data powerfully to be able to inform us as choosers, as to what we are choosing, and help us point that in the right direction, then that can be very, very powerful. So that was sort of at the heart of that third question. So those are the questions that we put out into the world. As with, I think, the other groups, we received a really exciting, diverse, creative set of responses, from data recipes to drone technologies to Earth observation, from Zimbabwe to China, a really exciting span of projects that we then went through and made selection processes around in the same way that was referred to. And I won't spoil the surprise, but if you join us this week, you'll learn who the three has the answer to how to redesign food systems. And it really depends on all of us. It depends on you being creative and bringing your diverse suggestions and your voice to this, especially if you're a voice that has not been fully heard in this space. And so we're so excited for what you may have to bring to those discussions, and I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Lauren. Appreciate that. And to your point about how interesting and compelling some of these projects were, well, a few things. One is, I know you didn't have an easy job in kind of finalizing them down to the top three. Two is, we are going to provide a medium by which some of the additional projects that weren't in those three can also have a voice. Some are very compelling and just we would like to raise that awareness to it and would like to extend it to the community. So stay tuned as well for details on how we can share with you not only about the three projects within this track, but also some of the other ones that were also submitted. So thank you again for that and for that effort. So last but not least, and certainly very relevant to today's day and age, the third track is on pandemics. Collective pandemic intelligence is what we named it. And similarly, we of course had convened a brain trust around this. And really spent a lot of time with a lot of great ideas and submissions around it. But I will let Tom Osborne from the VA, who is the leader of this brain trust, guide you through a little bit of that journey and introduce himself. So Tom, please.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that. Absolute pleasure to be here with everybody. So a little bit of background about myself. I'm a physician and I'm working at the intersection of healthcare, business, and technology. And like many of us, have an underlying driving sort of goal and passion to accelerate medical innovation that positively impacts people's lives. And part of that, I'm a director for VA National Center for Collaborative Healthcare Innovation. I'm also CMIO at VA Palo Alto, which is a big healthcare system. And so earlier this year, I was really honored to be part of the Xprize Pandemic Alliance. And the idea for that was to catalyze, these groundbreaking solutions to address COVID-19 and future pandemics. And obviously, this is a big deal for everyone in the world. And together we, really formalized this relationship, brought in other institutions, companies, and experts. And it was immediately clear to our Xprize Alliance that AI would be an important tool in this fight. And not surprisingly, so out of that, the AI for Good Pandemic Alliance was really a natural and perhaps inevitable offshoot of that. And so with that, we started to really brainstorm. We brought in really awesome people from all over the place, all over the world, came together to help address this issue. And our brainstorming, we really, we knew, obviously everyone knows AI is a powerful tool, but it needs to be used thoughtfully, in order to do anything worthwhile that is equitable and good. And so we sort of rallied around these ideas. We wanted to address critical unmet needs that AI was particularly well suited to solve. And we also wanted solutions that would be applicable to countries and people all over the world, not just people who had access to the tools or to the data. And looking forward, we also wanted to design a foundation and strategies that could be generalizable to future pandemics, because we expect, unfortunately, that this is a reality that we have to account for. So this led to us trying to figure out how we can specifically narrow down the focus and to sort of solidify and find the essence of these main drivers that we were interested in. And, to sort of summarize them, we had three. The main one was around like how we can support informed policymaking and resource allocation with these tools for COVID-19. The second one was around misinformation, how to avoid that, and how to maximize positive outcomes related to the thoughtful use of technology. And the last one was how we can incentivize appropriate data approaches to reduce the biases that we've seen and the potential bad outcomes to ensure the solutions are equitable and fair for all people. And so in response to that call, we had an absolutely amazing list of thoughtful and really innovative submissions from global teams and leaders from all over the place. And for us, I mean, Andrew, you were there. I mean, one of the more challenging things, I think, for all these different tracks was try to, narrow down all these amazing submissions into just three. And so we worked really hard on that, and we put a lot of thoughtful effort into it. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's a lot of experienced teams that you'll hear from at this event. And they've presented extremely innovative and creative out-of-the-box ways of solving critical COVID-19 challenges. You'll hear from them. I'm going to end here, but they're really elegant, thoughtful, and broadly impactful.
Thank you, Tom. And that's actually a great segue to where I wanted to follow up with each of you three. And it is about the audience and the getting the crowd's involvement here. So as we later on, when we close this, I'll give you a sense as to the agenda for the next 3 days. But while we have the Brain Trust here, I did want to first ask a question to each of the Brain Trust folks that are representing here, really about a message or messages to the audience here about how they might get involved over the next 3 days. So the first question I'll ask, and maybe Eisler, I'll start with you, and I'll ask the same question of the three of you, which is, we have a very diverse community on this that attends AI for Good and that are on these calls, and that hopefully you'll all be joining in one of the three tracks over the course of the next 3 days. But so also starting with you, thinking on the gender track, what is your hope that the crowd might bring to these projects, knowing the projects and knowing, again, this diverse community? What are your hopes in that category?
Great question. And let me just start by saying that one of the challenges we faced is that, the gender equity is such an important topic, but also it really is dependent on the context, the cultures, the technologies. And one thing we found about the teams is that everybody comes with a different perspective. And the question is, can we help them see how their solution can be adapted or can be applied in different contexts? And the crowd joining in shaping that understanding and providing input is very valuable. So I think that it's, to me, engaging a broad community with all the attendees asking questions or highlighting things that may or may not be true in different geopolitical settings, etc. So maybe that I'll start with that, and maybe others can help.
That's actually great, and that's a good to note. And we to reinforce that, we do encourage all those that do attend, ask the tough questions. Engage on these, because there's no better time to refine these projects. So yeah, maybe Lauren, a similar question, obviously a different domain on the future of food.
And a very similar response. I think the spirit of co-creation and collaboration and cross-sector creativity is really fundamental. I would add to that, ask stupid questions, offer crazy ideas. I had a really delightful moment at Visioneering that Xprize hosted last time, where someone who knew nothing about food came and said, well, it strikes me that we need to make kale as attractive as cake. So that's my question. Like, how can we make kale taste like cake? It was just it was a profound question. And I had never thought about it in that way. And it really stimulated a different kind of conversation. So come with your stupid questions, your crazy ideas. It will lead to a lot of brilliance.
Excellent. Thank you. And Tom, how about you?
Yeah, Andrew, thanks. I think just like everybody that's been in the space to, leadership or management, the solutions are always better when you bring diverse audience together to solve them. And, I think we all know that well, that have been doing this for a while. And this is an absolutely amazing global audience that came together for this really important issue. And so with our combined experience, excellence, the contributions, we'll have a really tremendous impact on solving these globally important challenges.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Well, actually, I think we answered both my first two questions at the same time, but let's think about the end state. Let's think about, we have a 3-day workshop here, and then we present them on the main stage next week. And with the end state, or being the end ideal state, in terms of we've gotten the projects understood, we've gotten the crowd involved, without giving away what the projects are and what the specific impacts would be. Can I ask each of you more of a general question of, what would be the types of impacts you could hope that these projects would achieve, not next week, but obviously with the support of the community as they launch and go forward, what's the types of impacts you would hope that they could achieve on the world? Ansari, maybe I can start with you.
That's a curveball. I tend to think about the co-evolution of technology and society. So I really think that what we see with AI and how it can solve problems across the board as something that require us to get used to the technology and understand what it is. And going back to the notion of having different perspectives. If it's only academics and technologists was developing it, that is not going to help with that evolution. I think there was a question earlier from one of the attendees about, how do we, when we think about global and how AI can help this globally, if you think about maybe countries where the challenge is just digital, it's not even AI, it's really about can we get data, for example. That's certainly way ahead of, let's say, let's use AI to do this or that. So I think for me, the value that I see from these projects is to inform the public about what's possible and to get informed with the real challenges in terms of deploying. So I think I see it as a step in an evolutionary process that I hope over time would really get AI to make the impact we hope it does.
And so similarly, of course, per our previous topic or previous question, of course, the community that's surrounding these projects and joining us on this can help in that endeavor as well. So thank you. I definitely share that same goal. Lauren, a similar question. What potential impact would you hope these projects could have in the future?
Sure, Andrew. I think there are a few ways to answer that. And I think the what of that is something I already referred to, which is projects that contribute to better nutrition, better planetary health, better equity. But there's also a who and a how that's really important. The who gets at human-centered design, which I and my teammates hold as fundamental to any kind of approach that you might do, especially with technology. Around whose challenges are you designing? Who will experience what as a result of this? Who is at the table? Who has decision-making power there? We know that a lot of the challenges in our food system are related to inequity. It's related to folks of color here in the US, or indigenous peoples around the world, or folks left behind in low-income countries. And so how we can design around challenges that really leverage the innovation, the spirit, the creativity of those folks themselves, and also design around those challenges, I think is really critical. There's also the how. And many folks have referenced how powerful AI is. And we're in a conference called AI for Good. There are also unintended consequences. There are ways this can go wrong. Let's ask those questions now. Let's have those conversations now so that we can point towards the good that we all have in our sights.
Thank you. Your comments also point out how much many of these projects do overlap as well, right? And we had many cases where we can see that intersection between food and gender, for example, or gender and pandemics. So that's one of the added levels of difficulty, I think, in adding focus to these projects. But again, we'll hope the community can weigh in on those. Tom, yourself for that same question?
Yeah, Andrew, I totally agree. A lot of these topics overlap in interesting sort of subtle and profound ways. And, when it comes to COVID-19, nobody, needs me to tell them what a dramatic issue this is for the world and society. Nobody is immune to this disease. However, it disproportionately impacts disenfranchised populations around the world. And those are very much what the other tracks are addressing, as well as the track specifically about COVID-19. So I think overall, it should not be understated that these initiatives will have the potential to save the lives of millions and alleviate the suffering of many more.
Absolutely. Definitely share in that objective. So we could keep talking, but unfortunately we have limited time and some logistics to get to. But I do want to start, Osborne, Lauren, and Tom, with a thank you, both to you, and as well, if we could also, I believe we have a chart on the full brain trust that has been behind these different projects. So I want to thank all of these members across gender, food, and pandemics that have helped drive us to the journey we've gotten to this point in time. So thank you again for all of that. And now I just want to transition a bit into what to expect within these breakthrough tracks over the next 3 days here. So starting tomorrow, so first off, the next 3 days will run at, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, starting at 10 a.m. Pacific. We actually, so following the keynotes, we stagger the start time of these a little bit. If you go to the AI for Good website, to the Breakthrough Days page, and you scroll down to each of the tracks, I encourage you to register for one or more of the tracks, whichever one you want to attend. They start at 10 a.m., 10:15, and 10:30, according to gender, food, and pandemics, respectively, over the next 3 days. We just stagger that a little bit just for logistics. Day one, which is tomorrow, we're actually inviting those 3 projects that you've heard so much about, and we've told you to get excited about, but let the anticipation build to tomorrow. So you'll get the first presentation from each of those 3. So 3 within gender, 3 within food, and 3 within pandemics. That's a short presentation followed by a Q&A. The goal of tomorrow is really help you as a community understand what the project is all about, to really set ourselves up for an engaging workshopping over the 2 days that follow that. Day 2, which is Wednesday, again, same start times, let's stagger 10, 10:15, and 10:30 Pacific. We're going to have a guided discussion where a facilitator will drive down into certain aspects of that project, and within each one, again, encourage all folks to be contributing. As a note, as an FYI, those are not webinars, these are Zoom sessions, so everybody has a chance to get to the microphone and to speak and to add their input. And again, we'll divide the session into the into thirds for each of the projects. And then day 3, which is Thursday, is a chance, now that we've identified really the project, the challenge area, what the potential impact would be, we've workshopped that a bit, really identify where are those gaps and potentially, hopefully, where either you as a community that are sitting in those workshops or your extended network might be able to help that project get to the next step that it's going to need to. Then the Friday is an off day for those for the breakthrough tracks, and that's because on Monday and Tuesday of next week, those teams are going to present the resulting project, and having been workshopped over the course of the next 3 days, to this whole wider community, not split to one domain area or another, and hopefully gain the most amount of interest and support that they possibly can across this community. It is mentioned as well on the AI for Good website that there is a Slack channel that has been set up for AI for Good. Within the Slack channel, there are actually separate, within the Slack workspace, there's separate channels for each of the projects. So I highly encourage you to join that, to create an account on it. If you go to the Breakthrough Days web page on AI for Good and you scroll all the way down, you can see the registration for that. That's there for a couple of reasons. One is it's a chance to really engage and ask questions and commentary, etc., when we're not in the middle of a workshop. When we're in workshops, we'll still use the Zoom chat, or you'll just speak up. But it's also a chance to talk about these and engage around these and network with other folks who are attending after the session is over, or between when the session's running. So highly encourage you all to attend. I see that the sign-in link as well has been posted on the Zoom chat here. So please, please feel free to use that. Get on there, start the dialogue immediately. All of us are already on there. The project teams have already started to engage around their projects and so on and so forth. So with that, I think I will end my portion here, and I will hand it back to the ITU team. Again, I thank you for attending this. We're really excited about the next 3 days of the breakthrough tracks. Equally as much, if not more, we've got some great keynotes over the next few days. So please participate, sign up to a track, and I'll see you on one of those tracks. So, Fred.
Thank you, Andrew, for that excellent explanation. So I think that was really valuable for our participants who are going to be following for the next 2 days. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank a few people again. Thank you to Dr. Lee and Ms. Ansari for their opening remarks. And thank you again to Rhiann Eisler, and apologies for the technical difficulties, but I think it was well worth the wait. And there's a bit of an inside joke with the AI conferences that AI is easy, but AV is difficult. And we got struck by that joke once again. But looking at the comments, it seemed that people were quite pleased and very understanding and waiting. Also like to thank the Brain Trust and all the experts that have been involved in helping to put all of this together, everyone on the Xprize team, of course, and to thank our sponsors, our co-convener Switzerland, and last but not least, you, the participants. And looking at tomorrow, we have a keynote from Stuart Russell, Professor of Computer Science at UC Berkeley, presenting a keynote on beneficial AI to advance the SDGs. I'm very much looking forward to that. And we'll have a second keynote from Caroline Criado Perez. She's an author, activist, journalist, the author of the book Invisible Women, and she'll be presenting on AI, gender, and data. And so these require separate registration, as Andrew said. And likewise, we're very much looking forward to the kickoff of the 3 breakthrough sessions on gender equity, future of food, collective pandemic intelligence, and they also require separate registration. So I know it's getting late in some parts of the world, and so I'll leave you with that. And thanks again for all your participation, and we look forward to meeting you all again tomorrow and the next few days. Thank you, and good evening.
Selector, rewind selector, rewind selector, rewind selector, rewind selector, rewind selector. selector. Rewind 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 selector.